Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and today's podcast takes a close inspection of the UK's ever-deteriorating local roads condition. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the ALARM survey, the annual local authority road maintenance survey, which for the last 3 decades has been the crucial benchmark for assessing the state of local roads across England and Wales. It's commissioned by the Asphalt Industry Alliance, and the report was published last week to provide an invaluable snapshot of road conditions, funding levels and the growing maintenance backlog across the UK's local road network. And once again, the 2025 findings, which are based on real feedback from real local authorities, they paint a stark picture. Local roads remain in decline, with 34,600 miles in poor condition, and the cost to clear the repair backlog reaching an all-time high of £16.81 billion. And while, of course, some might argue that, well, they would say that, wouldn't they? The reality is that despite the UK government's pledge to fix 1 million potholes per year, we are still very far short of the long-term sustained investment needed to tackle the deep-rooted structural issues across the network. Because local roads are a vital economic asset, and they're valued at over £400 billion, but just 1% of this value is allocated for annual maintenance. It's a shockingly poor stat given how much we all rely on these assets. So, what to do? Well, my guest today might know. David Giles is chair of the Asphalt Industry Alliance, the organisation behind the report, and he's also director of Continental Bitumen UK. So he's someone who's ideally placed to explore the key findings, the barriers to progress, and of course, the actions needed to ensure a safer, more resilient local road network for the future. And his latest report calls for a radical shift in approach, multi-year funding, ring-fenced investment, and a long-term commitment to repairs. Something perhaps similar to the current approach to the strategic road network? Well, I don't know. Is that possible? Let's find out. David, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Thank you, Anthony, and thanks for inviting me on. It's very kind of you to give us an opportunity to air this important report on your podcast.
Great stuff. Well, they do come around, these alarm surveys, they do come around very fast, it seems, year after year. This is the 30th year, and I mentioned some of the headlines, but what for you is the single most striking takeaway from this year's findings?
What's really striking for me is that we've spent 20 billion over the last decade on the maintenance of our local authority roads, and yet the backlog continues to grow. And you would think, having spent that huge amount of money, that there would have been an improvement in the road conditions. But very sadly, in England and Wales, which is where the report covers, we just have seen no appreciable improvement in road conditions.
Right. I mean, I have been following this report over the years as a journalist in the sector, and as you say, it does grow. So now you're reporting 16.81 billion. I mean, how close, therefore, are we to a tipping point where maintenance delays actually become a crisis?
I think the tipping point for me is more about when do we start to have a change in mindset rather than the fact that we won't have any roads to drive on. It's clear that that's a slow and painful decline that we're seeing. And whilst, anecdotally, your listeners will see more potholes and feel that the road conditions are getting worse. And that's certainly the case. The reality is it's a slow managed decline that we're seeing. And so the tipping point for me is more about the waste of public money in filling potholes rather than actually maintaining the roads properly.
Because the potholes are just, I suppose, the evidence on the surface. I mean, they are a politically charged issue, to be quite honest. I mean, the Chancellor has acknowledged the pothole issue, yet successive governments have still failed to deliver this sustainable funding model, which in many ways, it's not just about filling those potholes, it's about addressing the fundamental stability and structure of those roads. Why have we failed?
Well, every year we look at the survey and we put our head in our hands, and in part we detest the word pothole because it doesn't actually identify the real underlying issue. And that underlying issue is that we haven't had the money to properly maintain our roads, and therefore potholes appear, and they are simply a manifestation of the fact the road has worn out. Why have we failed? We failed because of short-termism. there isn't enough long-term thinking around the funding of the highway maintenance of our local authority roads. Engineers just do not know from one year to the next how much money they're going to get to be able to spend on the carriageway.
But I suppose the contrast, as I flagged in the intro, of course, is that the strategic road network does have that ability to plan long term. It isn't doing short term fixes. It's got long term investment. So why is it so difficult for us to do that in the local roads?
Well, you're absolutely right. We get 30 times more funding for the strategic network compared to the local authority roads. So, your listeners might say, well, why is that? Because every journey begins and ends on a local authority road. So why are they viewed with such a low priority in terms of maintenance compared to the motorways?
Well, I mean, there are some numbers that you quote. 1.9 million potholes were filled last year. And I suppose that underlines the fact that if you're just filling potholes, you're not actually addressing the issue because the conditions are worsened. I mean, is it about basically breaking out from this reactive maintenance and accepting that simply isn't working?
Absolutely. And I think some of your listeners will be the very engineers who every year have to wonder where do they spend their money? And I guess what they are needing is some certainty or surety of the amount of funding they're going to get. But that just simply does not happen. And so they're not able to plan a program of works.
Yeah, I mean, let's just talk about the report about why it matters, because you say it's 30th anniversary, and every year it raises some very big issues around the management of the road network. And I've spoken to a couple of politicians on the podcast over the last few months, and the point that's made is, I suppose, 2 points. One is that infrastructure and politics, they are really umbilically linked to each other, and the second thing is that this particular government has got to start showing some results pretty soon to demonstrate the electorate is in their thoughts if they're going to get re-elected in 4 years' time. So how does the impact of local roads affect local communities? How does it affect local businesses? And what kind of impact do you think that a survey like this makes to communities?
Well, first of all, let's think about what the Public Accounts Committee recently said. They said that the ALARM survey was probably the only reliable source of data, and it comes from 80% of the local authorities in England and Wales. It's probably the only reliable source of data to tell them what the condition of the roads are. Now, if it's that important, it's the only report, then it's the only mechanism of shining a light on the problem. And I think you then ask, how does it affect local communities? Ask any of your listeners who are bumping up and down the roads on their bicycles or in their cars, how it affects them. Yeah. It damages their vehicles. It causes safety concerns. And above all else, it means we're putting road cones out to fill potholes almost in an emergency fashion instead of properly planning maintenance, resurfacing roads, doing it once and getting it over and done with.
So you're valuing the local roads at 400 billion. You're saying only 1% of that is spent on maintenance. So after 30 years, David, what is an appropriate level investment then? How do you sustain this network? How much money needs to be spent?
I think any local authority engineers you will talk to will effectively say, we need to double the amount of money we spend on the roads. That's the simple answer. In monetary terms, we're talking about an additional 4 billion a year is needed straight away to start to get us back to more planned maintenance. But these sums are so big, the backlog is so big that really what we're calling for, which is achievable, is let's get a 5-year funding horizon in place. Let's make a substantial and sustained increase in the amount of spending. And also, let's ring fence that spending so it doesn't disappear off into other local authority areas.
It's hard, though, isn't it? Because a doubling of investment is a substantial amount of money for local authorities who are very strapped for cash at the moment and have got huge pressures on them around the welfare issues, the adult children's social care, which demand a huge amount of resource and an increasing amount of resource. Is it realistic to make that request?
I guess our role in this is to, as I said earlier, shine a light on the problem with credible data. If you ask me, do I think it's achievable? When I said that 30 times more money is spent on the strategic network, the motorways, then that in itself is an answer to your question. Well, it's achievable to spend significantly more on motorways. So why shouldn't we have a change of mindset and start to value our local authority roads in the same way as we do the motorways?
Yeah, and some would argue there's quite a lot more money spent on the railways, which may come into play there. What happens if we don't? What happens if we don't spend this money? Because, to be fair, you do make this case and you shine this light every year. Things haven't really changed a lot, as you said. What happens if we don't do this?
Well, if we don't invest to improve the condition of the roads, then ultimately you will see more and more roads filled with potholes which don't last, and more public money wasted in going into potholes. And I just don't think that's a sustainable model.
Right. Let's talk a bit about you, David, because you have been involved in the highways business all your career, working for Shell 20 years ago before joining Continental Bitumen, which is part of the Colas Group 5 years ago. And I suppose maybe chat a bit about what the role of the supply chain is, because we've seen a drive towards greater efficiency, less carbon, more innovation. And, you're doing things such as biogenic bitumen, trying to take the carbon out of bitumen. How would you say the sector has changed over this time? Are we getting better at making road surfacing and road structures last longer?
I think the industry is ahead of what our customers are asking for, what they are able to use on the roads. So there are polymer modified binders, which have been around for a very long time, which significantly improve the durability of asphalt, but they are more expensive. Even though the economic case is there for using them, because there is a greater cost to that increased durability, local authorities can only use them in cases where they can really see the need, so very heavily trafficked roads. Now, we see them used in Scotland because of a specification called TS 2010, and they've taken a very different approach of valuing that improvement in durability. We're starting to see that come through now in England and also in Wales, where they're also adopting a very similar kind of approach to Scotland. But it's taken a long time to get traction to use enough of these products to really see a difference in the economic value of them.
And the reason for that taking time is what? Just simply because local authorities like sticking to what they know?
Well, you're buying a higher value product that lasts longer, but the local authorities are challenged to pave as many miles of roads as possible. So they only use the modified bitumen where they can see that it will definitely provide them with a short-term return and not necessarily that longer-term return that you will also get from these modified binders.
Yeah. So what's the role of the Asphalt Industry Alliance in, making this case? What does it do? How do you get involved? How does it make that case?
So the Asphalt Industry Alliance, the AIA, is a collaboration between Eurobitume, which are the bitumen suppliers, and the Mineral Products Association, who take the raw materials out of the ground, the rock and the stone that's needed, and the fillers, and then they make the asphalt. And also, some of those companies are also the contractors that lay the asphalt on our roads. So what we do is we focus on obtaining the data from the local authorities, and we obtain the data in a more and more extensive way every year so that we can start to understand the changes in the industry, and we can really shine a light where it's needed to make those arguments for the the industry to get more funding.
Yeah. Because you're no stranger to this whole industry politics issue, and there's a lot of politics that are required. There's a lot of discussions that have to be had. You're no stranger. You spent 3 years with Eurobitume. What was that role, and how do you go about that politicking?
Yes, so I was the general manager of the UK activities for Eurobitume, and Eurobitume's role is as a trade body. They work on specifications for products. They work on safety, which is an important area in the handling of bitumen. But we're also, along with the IHE, the Institute of Highways Engineers, and importantly, the MPA, we're part of an all-party parliamentary group. And there we campaign at Parliament for the use of higher value products, for more funding for the roads. But we also talk about training programs for the operatives who are working on the highways and so on. So there is this opportunity to engage with politicians through those trade associations, and the AIA is the real driver behind that.
I said, when you come out with a report such as this, a lot of people might say, they would say that, wouldn't they? This is just a load of road material producers trying to sell more stuff. I mean, it's not, though, presumably. It goes beyond that.
Well, I think there are two things to say about that. The first is we do not hide the fact that the AIA is comprised of two trade associations, the Eurobitume and the Mineral Products Association. And we're really proud to be part of that organisation that gets 80% of the local authorities to provide a huge amount of data to us every year. So being part of that organisation allows us to put our arguments forward for more funding in a credible way.
Right.
The second thing is that we're seeing volumes decline year on year in terms of both the asphalt and the bitumen that we sell. So, I will not apologise for the fact that we're out there campaigning. This is an industry that can very quickly provide the government's growth agenda if we are given the funding to do it. And that is what we're arguing for.
And of course, create the kind of increase in living standards which the public can actually acknowledge and recognise.
I think those living standards are about safety. Those living standards are about the ability to travel to work comfortably without damaging your vehicle or without becoming damaged yourself. Let's face it, the role of asphalt is to provide a smooth and level surface to travel on. And we're not really achieving that at the moment in many places, are we?
You're based in the northwest of England. Are you a big road user yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love motorbiking, a bit of cycling, although my weight doesn't always attest to that. I have an electric assist bike, so I go out on the roads regularly around the lanes of Cheshire. And I also am a driver of an electric vehicle. And so, I use the roads an awful lot.
Yeah, I hear you've also got a Land Rover.
Yes, I'm one of those people who enjoys tinkering. And let's be honest, if you own a Land Rover, it's a bit like having an unmaintained road surface, isn't it? They don't always work properly.
David, yes, I know all about that. They are an unfinished project for their entire life. An unfinished project. Any favourite roads that you like to cycle on or you like to drive on?
Cheshire is a beautiful county, and I tend to get up into the hills if I can. The road between Buxton and Macclesfield is well known by motorcyclists, has some very small lanes that go off through the forests, and it is a gorgeous area to drive. I'd encourage anybody to visit that area.
Well, as an ex-motorcyclist, I suppose I have to ask, what motorbike have you got now?
Well, I do a bit of off-roading as well as on-roading. I've got a GS 1300 BMW, and I've also got a CB 300 Rally, which is an off-road bike that I do a bit of green laning with.
Oh, right. For goodness me. Well, it sounds... I got rid of my R850R BMW probably 10 years ago now, when I had a moment of mortality. But then I was living in London and it's slightly busier maybe around there. Anyway, let's get back to the report. The Asphalt Industry Alliance is calling for a 5-year funding period, as you mentioned, given like those given to the national highways. I mean, what would this change practically do for the delivery of local roads?
Well, let's start by saying that if you invest £1 in your local roads, a DFT-backed report tells us that you get a return in terms of economic benefit of £9.10, in fact, they quote in their report. So that investment that we're calling for, by giving a 5-year horizon, enables proper planned investment. You will look at an area of your network and say, right, we're going to have a sustained program of improvement over a period of time. That's just not possible at the moment because engineers don't know how much money they're going to get. So these longer, more complex reinstatements are just done by saying, well, we can only do this amount this year, which is not the most efficient way or the most cost-effective way of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, and have you got evidence that shows that this long-term investment strategy would actually reduce the costs for taxpayers in the long run?
Well, I think the example I would point to is a strategic network, and the reason that the motorways are in, by comparison, such a good condition is that they have had that sustained, forward-planned, long-term horizon of spending. You get the RIS process. This is not what we're seeing in local authorities. So we're only asking for what has been achieved and can be achieved elsewhere in our road system.
Because I mean, the government's pledged to fix an additional 1 million potholes a year, and you said potholes is a phrase that you don't entirely like to hear, but I suppose what it does do is it gives local communities an actual tangible demonstration that their roads are being invested in. But is it a serious solution for you, or is it just a headline grabber?
Look, potholes is what gets us on the front page of a newspaper, but potholes are not anything other than the symptom. And this is why, in some respects, we detest the word potholes, because it's not the problem. It's just a way of getting the public to understand the bigger problem. So potholes, filling them is not solving the problem. We spent 17.5 million potholes have been filled over the last decade, one every 18 seconds. It's just unbelievable. What a waste of money when we know that half of those potholes, I can't remember exactly the figure, but if you divide the amount of money that's been spent by the number of potholes, I think you come out with something like £80 per pothole. Well, we know that £80 will only last a very short period of time in the road before it appears again. So what a huge waste of money.
So how do you? What's the solution? How do you persuade decision makers, and they may be the cash-strapped local authorities, or they may be the politicians who set about this longer-term view? How do you persuade them that road investment is not just about infrastructure; it's about economic growth and it's about safety?
Well, that's exactly what we are trying to achieve in the AIA every year with this data that we obtain from the local authorities, and we're extremely grateful to them for continuing to provide us with that data, because it takes a long time for them to complete the report. So thank you to them. But how do we do it? How do we convince the politicians? We keep doing what we're doing and shouting as loudly as we can. And so thank you to your podcast, because this contributes to an understanding of what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Any technological solutions out there, David? We hear that technology is going to solve an awful lot of problems, AI-driven maintenance planning, alternative road materials. Is there a technology solution hiding around the corner which is just going to take all this problem away for us?
Do we need one is the first question. When you think that most of our local authority roads only get surfaced every 93 years, and it's not every road that's got a pothole, you've got to say it's a pretty durable material, and our local engineers are doing a fantastic job in keeping our roads going. But there are products, not only the polymer modified binders, we have low carbon materials, we have materials which will effectively take in the carbon. You've got all sorts of different technologies being developed out there. And I would argue that the industry is ready to deploy a lot of those materials, but they don't go much beyond a trial status or small volume use because the money isn't there to use them. So yes, we have the technologies, but there's no magic spaceship that comes and fills potholes.
But are there ways to detect whether an intervention before the roads start deteriorating, using some kind of technology that you can go and monitor those road conditions on a regular basis?
So that is happening. There are local authorities who have vans driving around with radar and LiDAR. You have the rubbish collection vehicles have those kinds of cameras on them. So there's all sorts of wonderful examples of innovation on the highways. The difficulty is that, again, there's a cost to doing this. And I'm really sorry to keep going back to this same argument, but, when you are cash strapped in whatever field of economic activity you're in, then your focus becomes short term and it becomes just fix what's immediately in front of you.
Yeah. So when you look at the biggest barriers, then political, financial, or logistical, what for you is preventing this shift from reactive to proactive maintenance?
There's no logistical constraint whatsoever. The industry is sat there like a tiger waiting to pounce. We are desperate to get this new innovation out there, used regularly. We are desperate to see an increase in demand for our products and to provide a better quality of roads for the road user. However, there isn't the money to do it.
Yeah. Or the political will?
The political will, I think, is really dependent upon priorities. And it's not something that we get involved in because it is our role to be the people that shine the light rather than to have a political volition. So I think what we do is inform. We don't create the political agenda.
Yeah, I say that because you had a record response rate this year of 78% from local authorities. I mean, do you sense that there's this growing frustration within local authorities about their inability to maintain their roads properly?
I was very fortunate to be invited to go to the LCRIG conference this year.
LCRIG, that's the
local council roads innovation group, and
right, yeah.
It's strictly highways. Fantastic event, and talking to people in the corridors and at the assembly there, I have to say that there's definitely an increase in frustration amongst the local authority engineers. I mean, these are highly qualified people who really do not get the appreciation they deserve. And honestly, I feel that we owe it now to the country's asset to start spending more money, but that is a significant challenge.
Yeah. Because none of those professionals want to see their assets in decline, I suppose. That's the bottom line. Nobody wants to feel that they're failing in their job.
These are the women and men that go into work every day with the objective of ensuring that our roads are in as good a condition as possible, and they aren't given the tools to do that.
So finally then, David, if there's one policy change that can make the most immediate difference to local roads, what would it be?
For me, it's that change in mindset of considering the local authority roads to be as important as a strategic network, and therefore to give sufficient funding to halt this dreadful decline in the asset.
And after 30 years of the ALARM survey, do you think that is getting across now?
I'm an optimist, so I hope that one day we will get what we need. Massive challenge, but if we stop shouting, then I think it will make things a lot worse. So we will keep making the noise, keep highlighting the condition of our roads, and hoping that there will be the political will to fix the problem.
David, thanks so much for talking to me about this report today. Certainly lots to do, lots to consider, and a lot of decisions to make, but I think the report certainly makes the scale of the problem very clear once again. So thanks for taking time out to walk me through it and talking us through the challenges ahead on the Infrastructure Podcast today.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today.
Not a problem. It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining me, and go easy on that motorbike. Go easy on those push bikes. Look out for the potholes. But sadly, that's all we've got time for on the podcast now, but there is more in the pipeline as we continue to probe the big issues faced across the sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the Infrastructure Podcast website, www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you will find background information and all the latest podcasts to listen to and to share. Thanks for joining us. Thanks again to David, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.